Welcome to the Becoming Body Smart podcast, where we unlock the secrets of sustainable health and fitness and help you master your health habits. If you're tired of quick fixes, generic blueprints, and chasing short-term results, you're in the right place. It's time to become Body Smart.
Essentially, what we wanted to talk about is strategy in what we're doing versus the tactics of what we're doing. So, on a surface level, it seems like strategy and tactics are kind of the same thing, but really you can't have one without the other. You will be unsuccessful if you don't have both strategy and the tactics of that strategy in place. I know, right, Marty? Marc's always cold. So Mark with his beanie, and do you have your onesie on and a jacket?
No, just
the jacket.
Yeah. And then my awesome.
So Mark's always cold. I'm always warm. It's kind of funny around the clinic where it's like Shannon and I in the car. We're always trying to adjust the dial. That's funny.
Totally.
So strategy and tactics. It's an interesting interplay between the two, because really without each other they're both kind of ineffective. So Marc, intro that. Tell us more.
in this whole so we were, Cameron and I have talked about this idea before, but the way that we heard it at a recent conference that we went to, they were talking about it in terms of business success, but same applies in any area of our life where we're trying to make a change and we're trying to make an improvement long term. And so the idea that tactics without a greater vision or strategy, how and when and where we're going to implement those tactics, it guarantees failure, because you need both, right? It goes the same way, right? If you just have the strategy but you never implement it, right, it just stays in kind of that dream and that planning stage and there's no actions behind it, then it also guarantees failure. So we need both, right? We need an overarching plan, we need an overarching vision about how we're going to implement, but then once we have that, then we can add the tactics, right? The individual strategies that we're going to do on a daily, weekly basis to move ourselves towards that goal. And so, yeah, it's the idea that both are needed, but that often, I think it's especially, you hear all this stuff about life hacks, right? Oh, do this life hack or do this life hack, right? This is the way to do this. And it's like, that's great and everything. And those things can be helpful. But if we're just kind of making, doing a bunch of random things and hoping that it's going to move us in a specific direction, we'll often find ourselves disappointed.
Totally. So that's the thing. The vision, we talk about that a lot, of kind of zooming out so that you can see the end from the beginning. You can see where you're at and where we want to go and how important that is, right? That's a critical piece that I feel like most of our traditional healthcare and fitness programs or practitioners kind of leave out. They don't see the big picture. They're just treating the little things, like just treating those symptoms, and then you go back in because the medication they gave you to treat those symptoms has some new symptoms, and so they give you another medication. That type of thing, to where it's like we're not treating the person, we're treating their symptoms. And so then we're just caught in this eternal loop of treating symptoms. And so we often focus in traditional healthcare too much on the tactics of what we're doing and not on the overall strategy. We never zoom out to go, what is the big picture here? What's going to help somebody live healthier in the long run? A great example is putting somebody in a walking boot because their foot hurts because of plantar fasciitis or because of a sprained ankle or things like that. So we zoom in too tight and go, oh, their ankle hurts, let's put it in a boot, it won't hurt anymore. When if we zoomed out just a little bit, it would be like, oh, long term, it's actually going to make their ankle hurt longer. It's going to slow down their recovery. The risk of other injury is going to be much higher, and their like likelihood of having more problems and having those problems for longer is going to be greater if we put them in a boot. So will they have a little bit more pain and discomfort as they recover if they're not in a boot? Yes. Probably so, because we're not putting it in this uber protected environment. But because of that, do they actually rehab way faster? It rehabs stronger. They're less likely to re injure it, and they're more likely to be successful in the long run. Yes. And so we often get very myopic in the treatments that we choose because we're just trying to solve the symptom in front of us instead of looking at the person and their situation as a whole and going, what's going to be the thing that does the least harm and the most good long term for that person? And so we've tried to really zoom out and say, what, how do we help you get to the 85-year-old that you want to be? What are going to be the best long term choices? And so we're not chasing short term results. We're not promising like you'll lose 20 pounds in the next 30 days or some of those things that you see on infomercials and on web ads and stuff. All of that is very fleeting. If you lose that 20 pounds in 30 days, guess what? You're putting 25 back on over the next 60. And so statistically speaking, because you have to zoom in too much to these specific tactics, but then you lose the overall strategy of what you're really trying to accomplish. And so they really go hand in hand with one another. That you have to zoom out enough and develop the right strategy and then zoom back in to be able to say, okay, these are the tactics that we're going to do to get that specific strategy. And it has to have a long-term trajectory. Otherwise, we're just kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. Um, uh, so many analogies that you could use there, right? Robbing Peter to pay Paul, or one step forward just to take two steps back, or whatever, those little phrases. But they all kind of apply, and there's so many of those because this is such a common problem.
So, as you're talking about that, right? That so often, like the tactics that we use are going after a different strategy, and so I think that speaks to this point of like being aware of what the strategy is, right? A lot of the tactics that go into
Mm,
place have hidden assumptions behind them, and so like you mentioned, if the tactics that we're using are largely just to treat pain, right? Like the hidden assumption is that pain is the major problem, right? That it's a pain issue. And so that becomes the de facto strategy is, oh, we're trying to get out of pain. And so that's, everything we do taking medications or some of the treatments that we do is all chasing pain. And if that's all that we care about, then great, I guess. But most people that we've talked to that are in pain, the pain isn't the issue. It's what is the pain preventing me from doing in this case, and the pain is preventing me from living my life. And so, if the strategy really, or if the goal is to be a healthy 85-year-old, right, to do all the things that you want to do, then that strategy is going to be different, and we're not going to be chasing pain. Like Cameron said, we allow and we deal with some of the pain so that over the long term we're healthier, we're more active, we're less likely to get injured. And so just kind of checking in on what's the assumption behind some of the tactics. And so a great example of this is actually a conversation that I had with a friend the other day. Is he was looking to kind of level up his morning routine, and going into the call with him, he I had some ideas. Oh, well, like we can talk about what's beneficial, and as we were talking, what I realized is he had implemented many of the tactics before that we talk about with people in our course, and talking. There were two big problems sticking out. One was he didn't really know what he wanted his life to look like before, years ago when he'd been doing these specific things for his daily routine, his morning and evening routines and time blocking all of these things. He had this very specific goal in mind, right? He knew exactly where he wanted to be. And he reached that goal. Like he did awesome and he had focus. But he'd been kind of meandering since then. And two, he had some long-term back pain that was actually significantly affecting what he was doing on a daily basis. His activity had dropped about 70% from what it had been before the back pain developed. And so had we dived in and talked about, oh yeah, like, use this tool and here's the daily performance planner and here's this and oh, you might try this for time blocking. That would have totally missed the issue because the issue wasn't those strategies or wasn't those tactics. He'd used many of those before. The issue was like, what was his direction, right? Where did he want to be going? Who is he looking to become? And two, like being able to get through and get over the back pain and learn how to start moving and start being active again, so that he felt good enough to pursue those goals. And so if we never stop and kind of reflect on what's going on, what might happen is that we use the right tactics at the wrong time or the right tactics for the wrong situation. And if we're doing that, then ultimately, again, they end up being really ineffective because they're not addressing what the underlying issue, what the underlying problem, what the underlying goal is in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So that reminds me when you're saying using the right tactics, but at the wrong time. One of my favorite things whenever somebody sees an athlete come on and do something amazing. So Courtney Dauwalter is a great example. She's crushing all of the long distance races. So like the 250-mile races, things like that, the ultra distance running, just amazing stuff. Or you get the Kipchoge's or the why am I blanking on his name? The European mountain athlete, Marc, that does everything.
Kilian Jornet.
I couldn't think of his name this morning. Still, my brain's still waking up. But you have all these amazing athletes that are doing just incredible things. And everybody wants to know how they train. What does their workout look like? And if you go and do their workout, it won't be the right workout for you because they earned the right to be able to do that workout. Like they've been training in a certain way for thousands of miles and tens of years that has built their body up to be able to handle that. It's not like they just started this yeah, like decades. That's probably a better way to say tens of years. It's early, Marc. It's fine. My brain is still working. I'm waking up. But yeah, most of them have been training for at least a decade, though, right? At least 10 years, if not longer.
If not tens of years.
Right, if not tens of years. So like Kipchoge didn't come on until his 30s, I don't believe, that he really started, maybe it was late 20s, but that he really started to be, who he is. Or Kilian started when he was like 7 years old, training at massive volumes. And so you see those people and think, oh my gosh, if I could train the way they train, I could be amazing. And the fact is, that's not true. If you train the way they train, you could be injured really bad because they earned the right to train that way over years and years of building their body up. And so they're using, obviously, because they're doing so well, the right tactics. It's just the wrong timing for everybody else to use them because they haven't earned the right to use those tactics. They haven't built their body up to have them be able to handle that. And so the volumes with which they train and things like that, I see that all the time where athletes try to build up to high volumes really quickly. Or they'll go from like, oh, over the winter I trained, 20 miles a week, and then I've got a race coming up, and so I all of a sudden jump up to 50 miles a week to get ready for this marathon. And so in a 2 month span, you go from 20 miles a week to 50 miles a week. So essentially doubling your mileage, 2.5 times your mileage. Um, and then we see injuries and we wonder why. And it's like, well, you should have built your mileage up over a year from 20 to 50 miles, not over a month or 2 months. Um, Even if you've been running for a long time, that's such a huge increase in daily average mileage. Um, that kind of stress and strain on your body can make a big difference. I've worked with pretty elite runners that will switch up what they're doing and switch to Nordic events. So like cross country skiing and things like that in the wintertime. And even with them, we have to really work on maintaining some running, like road running, so that they keep the impact on their body during the winter time. So they can't just do the Nordic stuff. So that when the spring hits and they start running again and go back up to high volumes, that it's not too big of a shock to their system. And so the first time I started working with a couple of these guys, that's what their complaint was. Is, I'm beat up every spring and blah, blah, blah. Like I'm always trashed by it. And so we've had to redo their strategy. And actually, this is the first year where they really haven't had to come in quite as much for body work and other things, because they finally have kind of gotten that strategy of how to build it up more slowly and everything. So I was a little disappointed that they didn't come in as much this year, but at the same time, it was a good sign that they've figured it out, like how to make that transition better. So I was actually happy for them. But yeah, that's the key, is having the right those right tactics at the right timing. And so much of that is having a strategy in place that helps you like know the timing, so that we're not jumping ahead, which we often like to do. We love to jump ahead in our health and fitness. It's like, oh, my knee is feeling better. I was able to run 2 miles without my knee hurting, so I'm gonna go try 6 tomorrow. Like what? Why were if you just got to where you could handle 2 miles? Why are you going to go try 6? Like, build that up slowly. Have the patience and the long-term outlook to build that back up slowly, instead of like, oh, well, things are feeling good, so I'm just going to go for it, right? But we tend not to have the patience because we're too zoomed in. So we got to make sure we're zooming out and thinking, if I build up slowly, it's still going to be faster to where I want to get to than if I'm always going forward and backward with my progress. And so it's hard to be patient, but implementing the right tactics, because you have the right plan in place, is critical for really making progress. And so in the end, that's what we're really looking for, is to keep making progress, right? And so if and we've talked about this concept a bunch, that if you're not making progress, if you're not moving forward, taking forward strides, we're actually declining. Maintenance is a lie, right? We've said that over and over. If we're just maintaining our fitness, we're actually dropping off at a more rapid rate, because time and age and everything is going to make us drop off. And so if we're not making progress, we can't kind of level out the curve of our decline with age. And so we really can curb that so much and still do really, really well. Let's see. Marty just said, I've been bad since IMWC, the Ironman World Championships, and just have run a few times. No, that's not bad. I understand that, Marty. You got to let your body recover and heal. That's okay. To still run a few times, it's only been a little over a week, so you're good. But yeah, keeping some volume on, but allowing your body to recover is good. And cross training is good. But you wouldn't want to go months that way. You wouldn't want to go the whole winter having not run and then try to pick up a similar volume to where you are now, or where you were right before the race anyway. you wouldn't want to pick that up in just like a month or two uh, time frame. Otherwise, you can get injured. So it's okay to recover a little bit and stuff, and maybe just do walks instead of runs, and still load your body in some way, but to just back all the way off and then join it full tilt, not a good idea typically. But we see that all the time. Oh, I'm going to take the next 2 months off of running because of a marathon or something that they did, and then they get right back to 30 miles a week or 50 miles a week. I see runners do that all the time where they're like, oh, yeah, I'm going to take some time off after my marathon. And then when they get back into it, they go full bore. Um, and that is a recipe for disaster. You let everything weaken for those couple of months in terms of impact on the bones, tendons, ligaments, things like that. And then you go back to a high volume of running. That's a recipe for disaster. And so, yeah. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
So this reminds me of an athlete we saw over the course of several years, and this actually goes. This involves strategy and tactics, and um,
Your friend, push.
making sure that, like, with our goal, even that we have the right strategy in place. And what I mean by that is this this person's goal was like they wanted to be um, the best in the events that they did, right? They wanted to be sponsored, and
Love you, bud.
so what happened though is that, like, that might have been the right goal, right? That might have been the aim, but the way that they went about doing that just led to injury after injury and after injury, and they essentially just threw their body at the problem. And so it actually ended up getting in the way of them reaching that goal in the most effective way, right? Had they planned that all right, the same goal in mind, like I want to, I want to be kind of at the top in this event. Um, it was really a struggle, right? Sometimes they do really well and they'd win stuff, but then they'd be sidelined by an injury, right? And it would take them out for a while. And so because they didn't go about that goal right, they didn't have a strategy that would help them do that in a sustainable way. They got knocked out, and that's really the thing, right? You look at the top level performers at anything in life, and and most often the underlying thread that pulls them all together is that they live to play another day, right? They were able to be consistent in the right ways that led to them getting to play the game still. And so sometimes the big gambits that people take with their health, right? I'm going to just push really hard. Like, it might help you to achieve a few short-term goals. But again, if we push our body harder than it can adapt to, right? We don't allow enough time for recovery, then it always takes us out of the game. And so if we can live to play another day, right, and understand that it's never like no one workout, no one everything matters that much, but like it's what we can string together consistently over time in terms of building our body, in terms of improving our habits, in terms of any long-term goal that we want to accomplish. It's just, what are we doing to play another day, to stay in the game and to
Mm-hmm.
keep going? And usually that's just small, consistent efforts, right? Those small, simple changes over time that end up compounding on one another.
I love that, Mark. So I think that's so true. I think of one. We're talking about a lot of racer and runner examples just because they're so extreme. But I'm thinking of one local runner, Riley Cook, who is still running and winning races and doing really well, and he's in his early 40s, um, and still kind of at the local level is still crushing it. Um, and in thinking kind of why he's doing so well and still being able to run as well as he is, I think he has DNF'd a lot of races, right? So he's not finished a bunch of races. And part of that is because he kind of has that live to play another day mentality. That race is not worth him blowing up everything and maybe limiting his ability to ever race again, um, at that level anyway, by pushing through. So there's one thing to be said about like persevering and finishing and stuff like that. That's great. But being willing to walk or jog at a level that's not competitive anymore. Um, and so he just kind of made the decision of like, I'm just going to DNF it, tuck my tail between my legs and hit the next race, but be able to do so better because I didn't push through and cause an injury or cause a problem. That living to play another day really is an important thing, not just in our, races, but just in our training and lifestyle in general. That no one day, no one workout, no one thing is really worth injuring ourselves for and setting ourselves back. So um, it's again having that long term strategy, and so that's why we say like having a plan in place is so critical, or even that concept of avoiding the drop off with natural aging by just maintaining our fitness. The reason why that's so critical is because we don't ever just truly maintain our fitness, and so often we see people who work out for years. They've worked out and they've exercised regularly, but it's been somewhat aimless or just kind of haphazardly going from this to this to this and a boot camp and a class here and a this and that and the other, and it's just kind of this sporadic, non-linear, non-planned out, non-directional way of working out, which is not bad for their health. It's not bad for their overall fitness and things. It's good. It's always good to do anything and move and things like that. But it's more of kind of that maintenance thing, and we tend to see them drop off because they're not really working towards something specific where it's like, these are the goals. I want to get stronger. I want to get more cardiovascularly fit. I want to get more, have specific goals in mind of where they want to move forward. Like, right, this phase I want to focus on my mobility, and this phase I want to focus on building strength. And we've talked about that before, how important it is to kind of have periods throughout the year where you focus on different things in your fitness, and so that your fitness efforts are targeted and directed. That's really how we make sure that we're not just aimlessly wandering through and just maintaining and actually dropping off. And so having a purpose to what we're doing with our fitness really is important. That we're not just going through the motions, but that we are focusing on those things that are going to help us build up. Key point in all of this. So it's that you are headed somewhere with your fitness that really matters.
Just the last thing I would say is that our strategy is it's a great choice filter. They're a great decision filter
Yeah.
of, is this the right time to do this, or is that not? And when we can use it in that filter, then it helps us be more effective in what we're doing, and it helps us avoid doing things that aren't effective. And so anything that we can do to kind of filter out our decisions and make those easier can be really nice, right? Because there's so many different decisions that come in front of us on a day-to-day basis. And if a number of those are already kind of pre-decided, like, oh yeah, no, I just, like, that's just not in the strategy, then we have to spend a lot less time trying to figure out what's going to work and what's going to not, and what's not, and just kind of pre-make those decisions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I love that concept. I hear that all the time where people struggle with like, how do I fit in runs with friends and runs with this and that and the other? And it's like, well, you kind of have to decide, does that fit into the strategy right now? It may later, but it may not right now, especially early on when people are learning the heart rate zones and things like that. You may have to decide to cut out group fitness stuff for a little bit and say, like, hey guys, I'm trying to commit to staying lower in my heart rate zone. And so I either need to go slower or I need to, figure out a way around this. Maybe it's I can keep up with them, but then I've got to do all my other runs slower if I'm going to be outside of my zone so that I can fit that 80-20. there's a couple of different ways you can do it, but it's just making sure that what you're doing fits that, and you may have to cut out or modify some of the things that you do or want to do to really fit the broader strategy. So it's always tricky, and if you need help figuring out how to do that, I know a couple of guys that could help you out with that. So yeah, that's the call this morning with strategy versus tactics. Glad you guys were all on. Thanks for joining us this morning, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow evening on the call as well. So if you have any questions about strategy versus tactics in your situation, please reach out to us so that we can help. All right, thanks so much, and we'll catch you tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to the Becoming Body Smart podcast. If you have questions, thoughts, or want to continue the conversation, reach out to us on our socials or join our community. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps us bring you even more valuable content. Remember, sustainable health is a lifelong journey, and we're here to support you every step of the way. Live longer, live stronger, and become body smart.